But training is just like human learning. It's a neural net. It's just fair use.
It's all a lot of misinformation. AI isn't going to ruin our lives. It's going to improve our lives.
AI is
Ask
revolutionizing
ChatGPT.
the way we consume our media.
AI will require the collaboration
Grok.
of human creativity.
Don't you get
and
it? We
machine
are
learning
democratizing
to solve some of the
the way
world's
we
most
do
pressing
art
around here, people.
AI will
the
require
future
the
of
collaboration
AI
of
is not
human
about
creativity.
replacing
It
human
allows
creativity
Grok
to
for
solve some of the
augmenting
world's most
human
fascinating
capabilities.
AI will be an integral
Ask
part of solving the
ChatGPT.
world's biggest problems,
Ask
but it
Grok.
must be developed in
I'll
a
just
way
hire
that
a
reflects
Grok. AI is
Ask
going
Grok.
to
The future of AI is
Grok.
not about
Ask
replacing
Grok.
AI.
Ask
It's
Gemini.
about
Ask Grok.
augmenting
Ask
Grok.
Gemini.
Ask
Grok.
Grok.
AI is
Grok. Finally, we can make a Studio Ghibli film without paying a single cent. Hey, how's it going? You know, it just occurred to me, you guys gotta watch more Ghibli films. Now, I'm not particularly the first to attest my love for Studio Ghibli films, because many of my colleagues and people I like to watch with while I'm making poor life decisions, which is quite a lot, have done a Ghibli video. They have also done a response to the plethora of artificially generated slop that's been hitting the waves of social media. Even the autocrats and war criminals are doing it. So everybody is doing it now. And that is disturbing. Here's the thing. Everyone wants to be in a Studio Ghibli world. And the trend has been repeated tons of times. This is nothing new. You got Ghibli cottagecore for young people. And you got making Ghibli meals for the food connoisseur in all of us. Good, bad, deeply misguided, we want to live in that universe. Finding Laputa, working in a magical hot spring with spirits, delivering bread on a witch's broom. Yet, I find that in our current age of self-gratification and the all-consuming push to be the first to set impossible standards, we're just missing the point here. The point being that regular Joes, or those jerks that keep on spouting clearly emotional outbursts about getting mass disliked by their art friends for doing the bare minimum, is that Ghibli is not just vibes, it's holding a mirror to your face and saying, assholes like you are making the real world worse for the most vulnerable to live in. Oh, you're not going over. You. This video is about how the people behind your classics create worlds to prove a point. And that answers the looming question on everyone's mind, what makes life worth living? Because art is not supposed to be a one and done thing, and it's not supposed to be just put up there just for shits and giggles. It's supposed to be hard work and effort through repetition. It's kind of like making a paper airplane, which I'm trying to do right now. Okay, so if I remember correctly, you gotta like do this first. So you gotta put, make it into a triangle. Also make this into a triangle as well. Oh my God, I'm going to suck this so hard. Does this look like an airplane to you guys? Because it doesn't look like one. Okay, either way, let's continue on to the video. The aftermath of the war greatly shifted Japanese society, moving from a conservative totalitarianism to a more Western, modern conservatism. The values that once upheld Japan during World War II had given way to foreign beliefs, and considering that the United States held influence over the remaking of the state constitution, it would shock the entire nation into capitulation. Hayao Miyazaki, born to a father who was director of his brother's airplane company, would remember very much the destruction of his country from a young age. His mother, whom he would base many of his female characters around, was bedridden for much of his young life from tuberculosis, and he, along with his siblings, were in charge of the household and cleanup operations happening in the vicinity. Some of these memories would even play a key role in many of his theatrical films. One that comes to mind is in Spirited Away in the bath scene, with all that junk coming out of the spirit, including a bicycle for some reason. Miyazaki's fascination and pursuit of the arts could be seen as him confronting childhood traumas or insecurities with people such as his father, whom he never really got to forgive up front with. However, evidence suggests, as stated by Suzanne Napier in her book Miyazaki Land, A Life in Art, that Miyazaki would utilize things like perseverance and acceptance to drive his passion. As she puts it, resilience, not suffering, is what Miyazaki repeatedly stresses. With this in mind, he'd go into the arts with strong conviction while also dipping his idealist beliefs into both political science and economics. He even became the chief secretary of Toei Company's labor union with Aseo Takahata, a familiar name who would be the Garth Alger to Hayao's Wayne Campbell. Don't know how I got to that analogy, but I just placed that image into your head, so you're welcome.
Swing! Swing!
When it came to the early works of the duo, they were a part of a new movement that took direct inspiration from the godfather of anime, Osamu Tezuka, the guy who made Astro Boy, Princess Knight, and several others. Many of the works they were showrunners in reflected their personal ideas about how to reflect childhood. For Miyazaki, it was Future Boy Conan, a post-apocalyptic anime taking place in the far-off future of 2008. Fantastical settings that can make romantic stories that look to overcome the war-torn present and find peace. As animator Yasuo Otsuka commented in his book, Miyazaki had already come to understand the kind of movies he wanted to make, and these were thrilling tales separated from the everyday world. Now with Takahata, who wasn't an animator in the traditional sense, it was more down-to-earth slice-of-life ventures such as Heidi Girl of the Alps. And if you are a Canadian like me, he also directed the Anne of Green Gables anime adaptation, which headlined the famous Masterpiece Theater. Now, lots of European and North American classic literature made their way into the Japanese curriculum and opened up new ideas and aesthetics that we still see in our modern times. Themes of innocence and compassion, with youthful optimism and imagination abundant. Yet the child characters of Takahata were also emotionally intelligent, and were obtuse to the structured society of old, rebelling however they see fit. Now, while Takahata met only subpar success in his animated films in the beginning, a prominent example being Horus, Prince of the Sun, Miyazaki made a name for himself by his first feature film directorial debut in Lupin III, The Castle of Cagliostro. Yet, despite their spats and their methods to execute their visions, they commonly wanted to go against what animation was heading towards at the time. The 70s in Japan were a time of cultural conformity, where the beginnings of consumerism were shaping, and TV shows for younger audiences were very toy-centric. Lots of action and comedy, but with no levity or appreciation for the slow and thematic. So you have TV shows like Conan or Heidi taking place outside Japanese society and positioning them in very European settings to reflect upon the bigger picture and showcase Miyazaki's penchant for imagination and Takahata's assimilation to the human condition. And after many projects, some separately or as a team, they would become founding members for Studio Ghibli. Although Takahata never had a contract signed, he just kinda showed up since he didn't think artists had to be contractually obligated to do so. And this is the start of the Ghibli dynasty. Nausicaa, not necessarily a Ghibli film, started the engines, but then you had Castle in the Sky, My Neighbor Totoro, Grave of the Fireflies, Kiki's Delivery Service, Porco Rosso, Whispers of the Heart, Princess Mononoke, Spirited Away, and more, and more, and more. Now, taste can be subjective, as tends to be the case with finding a favorite among these films, but then you can recognize the more obscure and underrated ones, especially the movies directed by Takahata. Yet while you can imitate the look of the art, you cannot capture the meaning behind it. Sorry to all you AI bros, you're gonna get your asses cooked in this video. Crap, I'm gonna screw his name up so bad. Jonas Seika put it best in a video exploring the philosophies of Ghibli's filmography, where it plays into what Martin Heidegger asserts that mortals dwell by safeguarding the fourfold. The mortals are humans, and the fourfolds being earth, sky, mortals, and divinities. This can be applied to the majority of Studio Ghibli films. And if you'd like to learn more about this idea, I'd recommend you check this video out after to kind of get a complete overview. So I gotta go triangle this, triangle that, and then I am missing the whole point. Ah, damn it! Starting with Earth, it ties deeply with the natural beauty of the landscape and how it reacts to outside forces. Western stories would go to the archetypal man versus nature, James Cameron's Avatar worlds that push forth that one side is better than the other. Nature is the protagonist, and the antagonist is a coffee-sipping megalomaniac whose only interest is in profit margins.
It's all over.
Nothing's over while I'm breathing.
I kind of hoped you'd say that.
And look, I don't mind seeing once in a while a villain take a much-deserved punch of cathartic punishment. That's a part of why we humans go to entertainment. In the Ghibli universe, though, nature is shown to be just as bloodthirsty and cruel as mortals are. Yet, it is also ancient and will never truly go away. It reacts the same as we react. Often referenced and spouted verbatim is the state of affairs surrounding the inhabitants of the forest versus the humans of Irontown in Princess Mononoke. First-timers to this film would often find it very difficult to side with either or, but for this part, we'll focus on the creatures of the forest. Divinities and nature are hand-in-hand in the feature, as the forest gods have an understandable hatred for the group that is poisoning their river waters and cutting down their homes. They believe that they're doing what is needed to safeguard the culture they have flourished for centuries.
お前には聞こえまい。イノシシどもに食い荒らされる森の悲鳴が。私はここで朽ちていくからだと森の悲鳴に耳を傾けながらあの女を待っている。あいつの頭を噛み砕く瞬間を夢見ながら。
However, even though they fight alongside each other, they are not without blemishes. The wolves are the most rigid as they view anything foreign or out of shape as threatening. Those traits are expressed in human form with the titular Princess Mononoke. For example, when Ashitaka falls off his mount from blood loss, the younger wolf's reaction to the incident goes feral as he tries to practically rip the boy's head off. It was only through the empathy of the human wolf princess that Ashitaka wasn't turned into a 4-course meal. That doesn't mean the wolves don't suppress their compassion and love. It's just that they will only do so for members of their own family. After all, they're only doing what comes naturally. With this in mind, a lot of critics and audiences were taken aback by the violent sequences of the film, and lots of people were surprised that this came from the same man who previously had a comically human-sized pig ride around in an airplane. Yet, as Susan Napier puts it in her reference to the period Princess Mononoke was based in Princess Mononoke, nature in the Muromachi period comes across in a completely different form. Still largely beautiful, but wild, dangerous, remote, and thoroughly non-human. It also has agency, at times spiritual and transcendent, and at other times, violent and terrifying. One of the film's great achievements is that it gives voices and faces not only to marginalized humanity, but also to nature itself. The gruesome sequences of the film embolden the major themes surrounding it, that the barbarism will only make it worse, and that there will be no winners. Of course, this isn't the only film that has this type of element in Ghibli films. Softer examples can be seen in Pom Poko, set during the 1960s with raccoon dogs, aka tanukis, battling for the right to keep their land. They all have an interesting relationship with humans, as while they don't like them, they tend to appreciate what they can offer. The food is addictive to them, and the machines they create indulge them to outright consumerism in their world. Yet what they do have is a magical preservation of the forest, and they use these powers of shape-shifting to project their culture and beliefs upon a bewildered population of dwellers. The ending sequence especially shows an almost idyllic compromise between human civilization and natural preservation, while acknowledging the fact that the actions of the Tanukis are ultimately fruitless, and that the best way to survive is to find happiness in the little that they have. It might be tragic, but it is also a humble awakening. The actions of the Tanuki in the film weren't really that altruistic. They constantly have a problem of jumping to conclusions and getting blindsided by the resilience of human society.
こう考えた末、社長の私の独断で無届けの大パレードを決行した次第でございます。
In certain areas, they are just like humans, except the Tanukis are, well, they got them big balls. With that in mind, it doesn't mean that we can oversimplify their actions as just another case of the ends justifying the means. It's more like if the Tanuki looked just like you, their reaction to developers stripping their land of its resources with scare tactics, vandalism, and full-on fights with the authorities would just make sense. It would be conflicting, but that's just how nature works.
人間どもはタヌキだったんだ。奴らタヌキの風上にも置けない臭い古タヌキなんだ。
In an interview highlighted in Turning Point 1997 to 2008, Miyazaki had this to say about why he reflects on nature in his work. The solution to environmental issues must be to shift our perspective from preserving nature because it is useful to preserving it because it is not useful. We have to discard our old way of thinking, of judging something useful or not, and realize that everything is encompassed in nature, including things that are not useful. Now, I've talked on length about the brutal side of nature, but I haven't mentioned its unsuspected serenity, because it can be when you take a step back. Castle in the Sky has an interesting relationship with environments, especially when it concerns Laputa, the flying city. Overtaken by plants, both the metropolis and the robot servants have been covered in foliage, and when the destruction of this technological base activates, the natural beauty soars high above the atmosphere. It flies away from humans, ever being able to reach it again, signifying mortal unworthiness for both its ecology and technology. The image of a symbiotic convergence of metal and nature is not lost in popular discussions, considering Chris Sanders' Wild Robot looks to be partially inspired by Castle in the Sky. Another highlight I found interesting is seeing this movie's appreciation of the landscapes and countryside of a region that was inspired by Miyazaki's visit to Wales, and through our little pieces of interaction with the citizens that surround the mines from above to below. It's a testament to the people's long-standing tradition to uphold the natural integrity and to never overstep this balance. Hannah Kang Wolter had this to say in her opinion piece on Hayao Miyazaki's thoughts on nature in his filmography. And as she summarized, "In my mind, if there is an environmental message to be taken from Miyazaki's films, it is this. Let us not protect the environment because we have to, or because it is the right thing to do. Let us do so because it is beautiful, because it makes us happy, because it evokes our respect and breathes life into our imagination." Yet, with that said, technology and advancement won't stay still, especially when it comes to Studio Ghibli's propensity for the aerial arts. The Wind Rises seems to be a culmination of Hayao Miyazaki's keen interest in airplane design and philosophy. A loosely semi-autobiographical tale that recounts the making of a significant line of Japanese fighter planes from a man with no desire to build a fighter plane, riding the wind out and witnessing the unfortunate mistakes that come from progress, something Western watchers can aptly compare with another biopic, Oppenheimer. The sky is in reference to the changing weather patterns and how night and day shift the cosmos of the world we know. Based on metaphor, that's how I like to view technology. It is a constant flux of good and bad, a yin and yang of the type of balance we tend to forget about when new inventions pop up. The changing of seasons could be how we look at the periods that led us through the industrial and digital revolutions. Jiro Horikoshi, the protagonist of the film, constantly interacts with this imaginary version of a childhood hero who proclaims what it means to be an inventor. Miyazaki has a love for those who can use technology to bring forth the meaning in the work. Think of the love interest from Whisper of the Hearts when he crafts his violins with tools, Porco's airplane engineer Fio when she builds the pig's signature seaplane, or the Valley of the Wind and its citizens' love for windmills. Compare these with complete opposites. Kushana's impulse to reawaken the Great Warrior, Muska's indulgence to use the great power from the city of Laputa, and Lady Eboshi's ambition to secure military firepower. These notions challenge forth and utilize our advancements for the procurement of materials to keep on pampering ourselves. There is nuance to the actions of these characters, especially Eboshi, who does good in keeping her citizens alive and even putting those on the bottom tier of society on equal footing, like prostitutes or lepers. Yet, technology can just so easily be the downfall of nations. Going back to Wind Rises, Jiro puts together an all-hands meeting where he outlines the perfect design that would fix all the shortcomings of his previous versions, and it leaves everyone wide-eyed and giddy about the result. Only problem is that to make it, Jiro would have to eliminate the machine guns.
ただちょっと重くなるんだ。機関銃を乗せなければなんとかなるんだけどね。
This harkens to Jiro's desire for creating beautiful planes. But in this world, planes are also curses. And considering what these planes would go on to do, it perfectly exemplifies the patterns of challenging and bringing forth technology. Now, The Wind Rises is a very controversial film in Japan, especially when it comes to depicting an era of Japanese history not fondly looked upon by its neighbors. The same can be said with Takahata's Grave of the Fireflies, as these films have been brought up by folks as a long line of features playing Japan as the victim. And while I do think there could be some truth to that, these films aren't necessarily giving their protagonist the victim card. Technology is non-partisan in Ghibli work, and the only reason for technology to go astray would be from the pressures surrounding the globe. There is a stupendous sequence in the 1923 Tokyo earthquake, one that Miyazaki's grandfather was involved in. And while impressive on a technical level, considering the time it took to animate every single person in this one crowd shot, it shines a light on why the country went down its path. It was seen as small and insignificant, without the materials needed to catch up to the 21st century. Jiro was romantic in drafting his passion to the skies, and it gave him a reason for self-existence. Yet he was also naive, selfish, and burdened with the prospect of giving up his creation to the military force that would end up joining the Axis powers. Porco Rosso is also a movie that loves its planes, and Marco, also known by his alias Porco, is reluctant to let anyone tinker with his breadwinner. He acts, ironically enough, pig-headed to those who transgress on his values and principles. The machine is linked to Porco, and it goes much deeper than aesthetics. There is a certain quote from Napier going back to Wind Rises that encapsulates the very reason Miyazaki decided to go with showcasing the film the way it is. She said, "With a few exceptions in museums, the Zero no longer exists. Jiro's plane, therefore, was a safe fantasy to project dreams of perfection, flight, and power into the foreign country of the past, and the movie a silent wish to end the onrush of time at a golden moment before the reality of war set in. By dealing with military technology that is defunct, Miyazaki can engage with his personal and national past in a safely displaced form. In the end, technology has an odd relationship when passed from hand to hand, and much like the wind in the sky, it can be mild or harsh depending on how hard humanity wants to shift it." On a related note, the character of Fujimoto in Ponyo is an oddity in the underwater realm, as he is not really a fish but a man who loathes humanity, and concocts formulas that can lead to apocalyptic destruction of the landmasses surrounding the oceans.
When this well is full, then the age of the ocean will begin again. An explosion of life to match the Cambrian age. An end to the era of those abominable humans.
He juxtaposes his daughter, Brunhilde, or Ponyo, who desires to become a human and wants nothing more than to experience life on the surface world. Very much a Little Mermaid retelling in a story that in 2008 was cute, but then when a tsunami hit a few years later, not so much. Fujimoto has many correlations with the character of Princess Mononoke, who also hates humans, and adopts herself into a culture not of her own. Nausicaa also sees herself on the side of the Ohms, more than she does her people, and Porco stays by himself in the reef while escaping the calls of fascism.
今なら俺たちの力で何とかする。ファシストになるより豚の方がマシさ。
Vice versa, the spirits who look at humans have disdain for them and with legitimate rationale. Humans pollute the rivers, the forests, and the oceans that have cultural significance. They build parks only to leave them derelict and abandoned when the money dries up, and they constantly threaten them with machines and guns. In many cases, Ghibli films seem to provide cases in which humans are the instigators. Yet, as I touched in the second part of this video, they are more complicated and distinct than initially introduced. Now, while Miyazaki's humans would make for good cross-examinations, I don't want to neglect Isao Takahata, as in many ways, I find his interpretation of the immortal conditions of values and tranquility to be something worth examining. Unlike Miyazaki, who spreads his wings and flies to worlds outside of his own, with few exceptions, Takahata was more inclined to keep things rural and secure, even in the most tragic of settings. Grave of the Fireflies is a movie many consider to be a depressing anti-war movie, the kind you would compare with, say, Life is Beautiful or All Quiet on the Western Front. Yet Takahata doesn't see it as such, which could be in the same line of reasoning as Francois Truffaut. In an interview with Gene Siskel of the Chicago Tribune, he believes that violence has ambiguity, and that there can't really be a anti-war film, despite the creators saying that they are. In short, every film about war ends up being pro-war. While Grave of the Fireflies takes inspiration from the book it was adapted from, the human character of Seda is more Takahata's vision of someone so entrenched in pride for his country that it blinds him to reality. During the last few weeks of Japan's involvement in the war, Seda and his sister Setsuko lose their home and mother to fire bombings from the Americans. They go to live with a distant aunt, but after a while grow frustrated, and make the decision to live on their own. This would end up claiming both their lives, and the film begins with the siblings reuniting again in the afterlife over modern-day Japan. Much dialogue is said about the main character and his reasoning for taking such drastic actions. Takahata wanted Seda to be a reflection of the youth that never experienced the time Takahata lived through, and to place themselves in his shoes. However, on one side of the aisle, people view Seda as a true patriot, yet that is what led to his undoing, and to his sister starving to death. The unwillingness to be humbled and grateful from those in reach. It can be seen in scenes like the interaction with the old man, who suggests the kids go back to the aunt.
それよりあんたら他に身寄りはそれが連絡つかへんのです。それやったらやっぱりあのうちへ置かしてもろた方がええ。第一、今は何でもかんでも配給やし、隣組に入っとらんと暮らしてはいけん。なあ、よう謝ってあそこへ置いてもらえ。
As while she wasn't per se acting nice to them, the aunt never really kicked them out. On top of having to keep her own family alive through rations, you can completely understand her frustrations. Yet Seda wanted to show he was tough and resourceful like his old man, a Navy officer fighting the good fight against the enemy. Seda indulged himself in the propaganda, and felt that it would give him the strength to conquer the storm. Yet if there is one thing that Ghibli films, and in Takahata films in general, like to enforce, is the importance of community. Humans are social creatures, and do better in climates that facilitate cooperation and harmony. It's something that Japanese society seems to follow to heart in their way of life. The trouble comes when anything seen as abnormal or invasive is seen and becomes neglected, like with Seda at near death in that subway. Grave of the Fireflies is something that was the first to go against the interaction of humans versus the unknown, and instead look at how human qualities intersect in extreme situations outside of their control. Nationalism doesn't produce food, and the fireflies that shine brightly at times of joy don't last forever. And if you look at another part of life that has an expiration, Only Yesterday is another Takahata film that looks into the trivial and mundane choices that carry on into our midlife. A woman looks back in brief recollection to her time in middle school, to the moments that pursue her even as she spends her vacation working a family farm in the Japanese countryside. She's 28 years old, no romantic partner, lives alone, and constantly gets pestered by her family to settle down. Her time as a kid growing up in 1960 Japan was filled with moments that would be very hard-hitting for many who lived during a time when the hardships of the past were distant, and the conversion to a mostly capitalist modernity was shaping up. I mean, why did the father slap Teiko when she went outside in her socks? Because it would make them look impoverished or lower class. Yet, that type of mindset is not so common in the yesteryears, with Japanese agriculture becoming less prominent, and Only Yesterday scratches the surface on the tumultuous industry and how some view it as the culture evolving away from the Shintoism of long ago, that being the appreciation for the woods and fields with acts of piety and charity.
田んぼや畑だけじゃないんです。みんなちゃんと歴史があってね。どこそこのひいじいさんが植えたとか開いたとか、大昔から焚き木や落ち葉やキノコを取っていたとか、人間が自然と戦ったり、自然からいろんなものをもらったりして暮らしているうちに、うまいこと出来上がってきた景色なんですよ、これは。百姓は絶えず自然からもらい続けなきゃ生きていかれないでしょ。
Ghibli films that were directed by Takahata also explored humanistic endeavors based on everyday situations. In a video I made, wow, that many years ago, Kiki's Delivery Service looked at a young, entrepreneurial witch making a living in the big city. That led to her losing her ability to fly, a skill she needs to be able to make income, a direct metaphor for burnout. It meant to her a meaning of liberation from the customs and busyness of reality, but also meant that she was lonely. And while she was able to grasp onto this power again in a sequence of events I'd commonly call the Miyazaki dirigible, explosive climaxes that seem inconsequential to the field of feature on paper, it doesn't fix the dilemma of losing her magic again in the future. Like, some days, we just won't perform our talents properly. It's kind of like a brain thing, like with Bob from Bob's Burgers.
You think I don't know that, Daddy? Something's wrong with my brain! It's a very simple task, and I'm not even close! I am broken, and you did this!
Kiki learns to better find methods and solutions to help invigorate her ambitions, whether that be from taking breaks, or in communicating with friends and loved ones. Then you have Sophie from Howl's Moving Castle, where the heroine is cursed with aging into an older woman, someone deemed undesirable in our world. Superficial appearances are constantly brought up in the film, whether it be Howl's outburst about looking ugly, or the Witch of the Waste using her magic to look more youthful. While Sophie never truly cures herself of her affliction, she learns to live with her condition, as do the other aforementioned characters. Ghibli has a very feminist outlook on how they construct their main characters, whether they be heroic, agile warriors, or star-eyed dreamers. They aren't immune to the hardships of the world, but are resourceful and adaptable in confronting challenges appropriate to their situations. The humans of Ghibli struggle to assimilate themselves to the changing landscape and aren't carelessly drafted as either good or evil. Much like nature, humanity has rhythm, and will continue on despite its resilience to the invisible world. Which is going to lead us into the last pillar, the divinities.
Triangle in, triangle down, then we do it all around.
I'm still figuring this out, guys. So Spirited Away is by far the most recognizable Ghibli film, and serves as a glimpse into the happenings of what goes on in the astral planes. The bathhouse is a source of respite for the spirits, as it washes them of any human filth that was thrown on them, many even losing their identity in the process, such as Haku, a spirit of the river that saved Chihiro years earlier. Much like the inhibitions of humanity, the Society of Spirits are not immune to the trappings of indulgence and nescience. One prominent entity is No-Face, a wandering spirit that becomes splurged in the temptations of the bathhouse, and showers the staff with gifts and gold while continuing to gorge on what he thinks everyone desires. His wanting of the main heroine is also disturbingly uncomfortable, something that Miyazaki wanted to explore as a critique of a long practice in Japan of underage exploitation, particularly of young girls. The gods in Japan are neither purely good nor purely evil. The same god can at times be ferocious, and at other times bring about gentle greenery. This is the kind of belief Japanese people have held all along. However, just like with humans and nature, there are gives and takes with spirits. Totoro and the Suit Gremlins, as seen in My Neighbor Totoro, are passive creatures that enjoy the little moments of life, while entertaining some sisters in their idyllic rural abode. They present a comfort living in their eco-bubble, where kind gestures are rewarded with whimsical optimism and hope for the future, something the older sibling needs as she feels pressured by the advent of growing up, and her emotional attachment to her mother's fight against tuberculosis.
この前もそうだったの。ほんのちょっと入院するだけだって。風邪みたいなものだって。お母さん死んじゃったらどうしよう。もしかしたらお母さん。
Spirits also correlate with the realm of the magique, most commonly represented in regions and individuals transforming because of a curse. In Miyazaki's films, he always seems to center curses as turning humans into more animalistic creatures, like pigs. Pork in Western cultures usually signify bad omens or allegories for corrupted figures or institutions. But then there are religions in the East that revere pigs as signs of good fortune and providing prosperity to the downtrodden. The boars in Princess Mononoke are stern and brash. Their numbers and lust for preservation overtake their emotions, and it's the curse of one of them that brings Ashitaka into the plot of the movie. The parents in Spirited Away are transformed into pigs because of their disregard for the customs of the spirits, and are justly punished for their avarice and gluttony. And then you got Porco Rosso, turned into a pig for a cavalcade of reasons. Could it be his reluctance to find love that he envisioned himself a pig to his childhood sweetheart? Could it be opposing a fanatic political movement that was slowly closing in on his country? Or could it be a manifestation of his survivor's guilt, put together with him saying in the movie,
神様がまだ来るなって言ったのね。
俺にはお前はずっとそうして一人で飛んでいろって言われた気がしたがね。いい奴は死んだ奴らさ。それにあそこは地獄かもしれねえ。
Miyazaki best put it that when a man becomes middle-aged, he becomes a pig. As such, the weight of the world for Marco became too great for him, that it would seem that the spirits transformed him into becoming what he always thought of himself. And it's pretty unclear whether the curse was lifted by the end of the film. While curses are linked with atonement, there is also a path of clarity and resolve that opens up, like with Ashitaka learning to see through eyes unclouded by hate. This can also be seen with Princess Kaguya, based on the tale of the bamboo cutter. A spirit banished from her transgressions in the realm of the moon and forced to grow up in human society. She experienced a simple lifestyle of rural farm culture until being ordained into a life of order and high society, forced against her wishes and missing out on the moments of life that would make her happy, until the end, where the spirits would reclaim Kaguya in her time of melancholy despite her reluctance to stay in this morally complicated environment. Divine beings are somewhat looked at as those without attachment to the mortal troubles, and aren't as sympathetic to the woes of earthly inhabitants. Universal laws, conflicts between free will versus predestination, it's a tug of war where life and death are entangled. Like the scene where Kaguya mourns for one of the suitors who dies because of her impossible to complete requests for marriage. She didn't care for the man, yet she does feel responsible for him dying for her hand in marriage.
みんな不幸になった。私のせいで。姫のせいではありません。姫のせいでは。いいえ。私のせい。
She feels regret for missing a possible happy life with a childhood friend, or she feels sadness for leaving her adopted parents. These feelings are very alien to her world, yet in this short time she learns the tumultuous throes that life gives out, and has an appreciation for the little things not found from on high, even though she will inevitably forget all of it. A fear she knows very well, and solemnly states to her parents. This film will be Takahata's magnum opus, and his final movie he directed as he passed away in 2018 from lung cancer. When thinking over the relationship between these four pillars, the realms of nature, technology, humans, and gods, I also looked into the psychology and philosophy of the people who created them. At the films not often looked at by Ghibli casuals and the general public, I realized these films are effectively akin to the desire to go back to the way things were.
Okay, 557th times the charm. Who am I kidding?
Now, let's reverse time back to Only Yesterday, a film that remedies itself in nostalgia. The scene that plays out is concerning our protagonist thinking back to eating a pineapple for the first time, how to cut it, and what it would taste like. An exotic fruit not found in her country, and makes her jovial about what it will be. But then she eats it. It tastes fine. Her family aren't quite as enthusiastic, and her sisters even give her their leftovers. That's kinda how I view nostalgia for what it was. Good to think about and try to relive, but not as fruitful or satisfying as we all wished it would be. Don DeLillo once called nostalgia a product of dissatisfaction and rage. It's a setting of grievances between the present and the past. In Ghibli films, many of the characters go through cycles of dissatisfaction and longing. Their place in life stuck with the envious attitude against what could have been. How the Tanukis and Pompoko try to reclaim their lands despite the impossible odds. How Chihiro's ambivalence to facing challenges makes her unable to see what's in front of her. And how Teiko Okajima feels chained to her past 10-year-old self. Even while rewatching most of the films in the Ghibli library, I can see from the filmmaker's presentation how they love to idealize the past in watercolor. When My Neighbor Totoro and Grave with the Fireflies were released, they were dual billed and each were produced roughly around the same time. Past reflections of what childhood could have been, and what it was for many living those periods of life. Miyazaki envisions his child protagonist as what kids would be, independent and headstrong while offering their own knowledge on par with the adults of their lives. Nostalgia demonstrates the push and pull of youthful ambitions, and our everyday strife to live up to them. Take it back to why we see so many online going for the Ghibli AI filters, a much more advanced version of what social media apps did decades prior. Studio Ghibli, the feeling, is encompassed in nostalgic 30-year cycles, where we start to look back and ruminate on the styles of long ago, trying to capture what was, despite it being lost in the craft due to technological advances. Everyone wants to live in a Studio Ghibli world, but are also deaf to what they were written about. Personal attachment is in contrast to artistic integrity, as in, we don't value the process of how we got that product to begin with. How I view these AI images is that they are all safe and non-threatening. They are designed to provide no dialogue to their design overture. That's the case for every artificial creation pushed these last couple of years, and that's mainly the point. It's been argued many times, and it's usually being pushed by the same crowd that were former NFT nuts or crypto bros that have been ridiculed time and time again.
極めて不愉快ですよね。そんなに気持ち悪いものをやりたいなら勝手にやってればいいだけで、僕はこれを自分たちの仕事をつなげたいとは全然思いません。極めて何か生命に対する侮辱を感じます。
We tend to forget the work that goes into making art, and while Miyazaki shares the lion's share of recognition, we can't neglect the efforts of other folks like Tomimi Mochizuki, Hiroyuki Morita, Hiromasa Yambayashi, or even Goro Miyazaki, albeit not my favorite director, but still holds value to the company's legacy. I can't describe it, but it's similar to how Hayao looked at airplanes. True, he felt great nostalgia for the art, but wasn't so wide-eyed to look over the many faults, especially from his family's crafty business practices in their old factory. Be it a plane or a pineapple, the watercolored memory of it seemed a lot better than the actual thing. All of us should really think of these movies as reflections of the human spirit, to do what we can and find balance in the way life comes and goes. Not to replicate, but to understand on fundamental levels, valuing what makes these films and what the studio overall represents, is what truly makes them soar above others. The latest film, The Boy and the Heron, is a reflection of a person's grief and the passage of time. A boy who lost her mother during a firebomb and who can't seem to move past it, ultimately learning to live. Based on the novel How Do You Live, this film follows a young boy's cycle of grief and struggling to break through the cycle with the aid of characters young and old. The birds all reflect different perspectives of life, and each one seems to reflect much of Miyazaki's feelings towards his country, the environment, and members of his family. The birds all seem to allude to how different generations and persons react to change, like the pelicans trying to survive in a new world unlike their own, or the parakeets who fight to control this fantasy world from an old wizard. The movie is a little bit vague on details if you're a first-time watcher, but with subsequent rewatches, I find it to be a fascinating blip into our current state of affairs. Studio Ghibli is in an age of uncertainty, where its old traditions are slowly eroding away, and copycats are coming up wanting a piece of people's nostalgic pies. The slob of AI is more just a symptom of a larger case study that would encumber the global state, and now we want to preserve it.
I find that in revisiting these classics, I also had run-ins and concerning conversations with people I work with, or I grew up with, listening to, throwing their hands up into the air and just saying, we're just gonna give up on trying to be innovative and just shackle ourselves to a conga line of mediocrity. No one feels connected to their passion, and I can sometimes feel attuned to it myself as well. Some days I wonder if what I'm doing is worthwhile. I ain't unique in this particular field, and on this platform, you, the viewer, have heard this a whole bunch of times from other talented essay writers and video journalists that have more experience than I ever will.
But much like, say, Mahito accepting his stepmother, I have to accept that life itself goes on. Maybe what we need is to accept the unexpected and project our talents in a new way. We can't really rely on the industry or the social public to pacify us. We can use this opportunity to grow, learn new skills, produce roots,
and expand our networks to possibilities unseen from afar. Ghibli films are great in showcasing the meaning of life, all the way up to its somber end. They teach us about the deep morality of a tree, the reckless abandon of planes, and the duality of the vulnerable versus the invulnerable. So, at the end of this long-winded speech, the secret formula to making Ghibli films is not to let life hold you down, but lift you up. That's the secret to how to soar like a Ghibli creation. Ah, damn it. Okay, so I can't make an airplane. For the love of me, I can't make an airplane. But I can do this. Okay, now I gotta go online and go figure out how to make an airplane. Oh my god, I am 28. How do I not know this shit by now? Thanks very much for watching, and a special thanks goes out to my brother and his fiance for getting me this book. It really helped me in finding sources for this video, and I love that they did that for me. I'd like to know what your thoughts about Studio Ghibli are down below in the comments. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you'd like to watch more content, as long as you don't mind waiting half a year for videos. It's your bra man, lifting off into the sky.